So this one got personal. What happens when the thing that once made you feel significant starts to just fall apart? Maybe you carried a title, or you built a ministry, or you ran a nonprofit that felt like confirmation that you mattered, and then crisis hit, or the numbers slide, the meetings get harder, and the questions start to get louder. And you start to ask yourself this question: who am I if I'm not that role anymore? Today on the Life After Ministry podcast, I'm joined by a new friend, Joshua Gordon, a pastor's kid who swore he'd never work in a church, who built a ministry-minded business serving pastors and then watched it unravel during COVID. And through a painful season and a courageous friend and what he calls spiritual physio, Josh learned to set down the need to be impressive and recover a truer identity in Christ. So we talk about the gap between intention and impact, and why being driven can actually be desperation in disguise, and how God meets us with gentleness when our plans no longer work. If you're navigating a transition, if you're wrestling with this inescapable need to be significant, or you're holding a secret fear about what comes next, then this conversation, I pray, will steady your heart. We're going to look at the difference between empire building and kingdom faithfulness, and how to cultivate relationships that can tell you the hard truth without losing you. So take a breath. You're not done. There is life after ministry, and you're about to hear why. This is Joshua Gordon. Well, hello up there, Joshua Gordon. Welcome to the Life After Ministry podcast.
What's up, Matt?
I say hello up there because somehow we've managed to get another Canadian on the podcast.
So I'm number two?
No, we've had quite a few, actually. Okay. It's been, I don't know where y'all are coming from.
If you're getting good, if you're getting Canadians, then it's got to be
good. we did want to go international, but we didn't think it was going to be, all of you Canadians. So it's okay, though. We like you anyway.
It's good. That's good. I feel great about you, and generally I feel great about the United States. We don't have to go into that too much, but
and according to our president, you guys are part of our country as our 51st state.
But basically, I don't know.
But then this episode could take a real sharp turn. So let's avoid that conversation for now. This is not a political podcast. This is a podcast about the church and transitions, which is not political whatsoever, is it?
Never. It's always done with the best of heart, like the best heart, best intentions. It's never a complicated situation. It's always nice and smooth and easy, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah. Well, and that is a thing, because I would say that I think the majority, there are very few cases where I would say, like, I could definitively look at a situation that we've interacted with and said, like, the heart wasn't there. I do think that a lot of the people that we deal with, especially in the world of transitions and terminations, the intent, the heart, wanting to do it right is there. Yeah. And somewhere along the line, it runs away from us. And what we intended to happen didn't happen. It's not what actually happened. So there's this massive gap. And so that is a little bit of what we're really trying to intentionally do, is how do we close the gap between what was intended and what actually happened. So
yeah, I think it's a great point. And I've been involved in some ministry transitions in my life, and I can, like, looking back on it all, say, yeah, I think that you're right. I think that the heart always was there. And I think one of the things I love about this podcast is that it equips folks to make sure that the actions, like, actually can express and carry out the heart. Because I look back on the big mistakes I've made when it comes to, because I've involved in other people's ministry transitions. We're like, okay, so you're no longer working in the ministry anymore. And I know that my heart was in the right place, but I look back in the actions I took. I'm like, man, I wish I could have done that differently looking back. Or sometimes I wonder, like, oh, okay, I hope my actions, my decisions, like, I did the best I knew how to. I'll say that. And so I think something like ministry transitions, like this podcast, what you guys are about, can go a long way towards minimizing the collateral damage that could take place. But
it's a very human experience, right? Like, it's not just in the world of transitions or in the world of church. Like, you've had a conversation somewhere along the line, either with your wife or your kids, right? Like you said, like, this is my intention. I'm going into it. And all of a sudden you find that you are, I mean, case in point, like I remember when my wife was pregnant with one of our kids, I don't remember which one. And, she said, man, I've gained 8 pounds so far in this pregnancy. And my wife is small, right? And all of a sudden, like 8 pounds later, like she had, like I could eat a foot long sandwich and gain 8 pounds, and I would just still look like me, But she gained 8 pounds, and all of a sudden there's like a tummy there, and I said, "Wow, only 8 pounds. It looks like 20," and that was not how.
Oh no!
That was my intended conversation did not go as planned. And all of a sudden I find my foot in my mouth once again, and I have to back up and, repair and rupture and repair. Rupture, repair is just the course of life sometimes, right?
Well, what strikes me also is like, that's how muscles are created, right? Like you kind of break the muscle and then like,
yeah.
And what also strikes me is that that's like the process of building trust too. Is where there's like a sense of vulnerability that's created when I choose to come to you because you've hurt me somehow. There's a vulnerability that's required to actually go and say, hey, I expose my hurt to you. And then when you respond well, that that relationship now becomes even stronger. So you put a whole history of all those like kind of interactions together, and you can get some really, really powerful relationships. So
yeah, and if that's a muscle that's being flexed, right, then I'm pretty strong in that area. I've done it more than once. So,
brother, I feel you, man.
Let's move on from mine. We'll have to just edit that whole front part out, right?
Oh, man.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Were you in ministry? Are you in ministry? Give us a little bit of the backstory and how we got met up.
Yeah, so I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor, and my grandfather was a pastor as well. And I'm the oldest of 7 sons, so you can imagine I grew up here my whole life. And for a long time,
take on the family business, right?
Kind of, yeah, basically. And so, I guess to make matters worse or better, I don't know. My father took over from my grandfather at the same church. And so I was like, as a kid, people were like, oh, you're going to be the next pastor at a Lower Road Christian Fellowship. And as a kid, that was, it's great. Like, because like, okay, I'm like the king in waiting, there's like this sort of, significance and value that's kind of bestowed upon me for something that theoretically is going to happen in the future. And, throughout my, as I grew up and like through, high school and stuff, my summer jobs, every once in a while, somebody who wasn't connected to my church or sometimes not even a believer would be like, yeah, you've kind of got like, I wouldn't be surprised if you became a pastor someday. And so I kind of grew up with this sense of destiny, if I could, I say it with a slightly sarcastic tone, but this sense of maybe a bit of a sense of calling on my life, maybe, but I pursued that through Bible college and really got super disillusioned. And I, through some like really difficult internships that I had, I swore I would never work at a church. I never walked away from Jesus. I always loved Jesus. I always trusted him. My wife and I, when we had just a couple of small children, we actually stopped going to church for a while just because like church had just become this thing that was such a burden of obligation. There was so much obligation tied in with it that I couldn't tell where my heart for people like kind of got eroded by just this, the same burden, I guess, that gave me a sense of, significance as a child. Like they never went away. And so as I grew older and began to step into church leadership roles, especially like a volunteer and occasionally in a staff position, that the same burden ended up like just really weighing me down a lot. And I ended up, swearing I would never work for a church ever again. I technically am not working for church now. I'm a lay pastor, so I'm on a pastoral team with 4 people. We planted a church 6 years ago, and so just through an incredible story of God's goodness and His faithfulness, He kind of stripped back a lot of the false narratives that I'd kind of been living with around what being a pastor meant, what being a church leader meant, and surrounded me with like really excellent friends And yeah, like a lot of restoration has happened. I would say the thing that brings us together today, though, is like I had a ministry of my own that I was running. So through all of my experience with church, I've been at like kind of every level of church leadership, a lot in a lot of volunteer capacity, and for the last 15 years, I've been running my own business, and which was working with pastors and working with churches a lot of the time, and really kind of taking the unique message and the unique way that God gifted each pastor or speaker and helping them to take that and spread it into the world. So for me, it's a very ministry-minded endeavor. And I was doing it because I loved it. I felt like I was having a huge impact, not only in the lives of my clients, like the pastors I was working with, but also like seeing the impact of the work I was doing in the lives of people was is extremely fulfilling. And most of my clients, like I said, were pastors. A lot of them were speakers who would like travel like occasionally. And so when COVID came along, my business was just gutted. And I kind of watched this thing that I deeply loved that poured like to me, it was so much more than a business. Like I'd poured so much of my heart into it and so much of my passion into it and my love. By the time COVID came along, a lot of the church hurt experience had kind of been healed. And so a lot of my love for church, my care for pastors, it gave me as an excellent platform for that. And coming to a place where watching that wither away, like virtually overnight, like I lost like 90% of my clients, my revenue tanked, being in a position where, having to lay people off, like I had, I think 6 or 7 staff at that time. And surely like over the course of a few years, I'd like lay each person off, I had people leave, like it's just agony, like absolute, like so much pain that I experienced. And all along, I'm like looking and watching things get worse and worse and thinking, God, what is going on? like all of this stuff. I'm like, I'm doing this for you. Like, and I'm doing for me too, but like, I felt such a sense of drive around this and excuse me, like this enterprise endeavor that I've been like, I've been building, and to watch it just wither up. And like, I just couldn't figure out what was happening. And so, yeah, it came to a place where it was actually the intervention of a very close friend of mine. We joke about like the muscle, creating the muscle of trust, there was a very close friend of mine who we had been through a bunch of stuff together, and he had really proven himself trustworthy to me. And so he was in a very unique position where he, more than almost anyone else in my life at the time, could come in and say, Josh, I think that you've got a really serious blind spot here. And he could really, really challenge me. And I kind of had to take a step back and just look at my whole ministry and what I was doing.
When I came out of ministry, I thought it was one of the hardest things I struggled with was kind of untangling my identity as a pastor. You're running a profitable business as a Christian. And
theoretically profitable. It was technically a nonprofit. It was nonprofit for sure at that point.
Okay, that's true. But that whole like getting our identity mixed up is not just a pastor thing. You can be anybody and get your identity mixed up, confused. What was that process of detangling a bit from that for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a huge question too. So I think the moment I realized how much of my identity was wrapped up in what I was doing, business is like, I tend to the dramatic sometimes. I felt like my business like it's smoking ruins around me. I hadn't officially decided to end it yet, but I had this moment where I was just alone, just praying and journaling. And I do that a lot, but I remember saying, God, like, why isn't this working? Like I've been, so this would be 2023 at this point. So COVID had really loosened up, and I'd kind of expected that my clients would come back and so I'd reached out to a bunch of them, and they were coming back, but not nearly to the level of engagement and commit like financial levels that they had before. And I was like, God, why isn't this working? Like, this is just like this. Why? And he answered my prayer, he answered my question. I had an immediate response, and it was a crystal clear memory. And this is one of the ways that God speaks to me, or like is that like a really brilliantly clear memory will come to mind, like way more detail than I could typically recall. And it was me walking downstairs because we lived in a walkout basement apartment at the time of this memory. And my little daughter, Piper, she was like maybe almost 2 at the time, our oldest girl. And she like said something to me, and I had no clue what it was because she was babbling. And I remember being a little bit distracted, and Sarah she could tell something was on my mind. I'd had a really, really rough day at my job. And so this memory was like 16 or 17 years ago, previous to 2023. And I was working at a nonprofit, an international nonprofit, and it was like not quite entry level position, but kind of. And I had just a really, really difficult day. And she's like, "What's wrong? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, "I've decided I'm going to quit my job." And this is the part that God really underscored for me. He was like, and I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to build a business that's so successful, I'll be able to walk into any room and talk to any person and belong there because of what I've achieved and what I've built. And I kind of feel silly saying it because like you can say it out loud like that. It's like, oh my gosh. Like, and so God brought that back to my mind. There's like this immediate understanding that there were so many things going wrong in my business. And so many things going wrong that I was just ignoring, because to face that required facing my own shortcomings and facing my own inability to actually do the thing I'd set out to do, which was to build this huge, wonderful business and all this stuff. And I mean, in all fairness to myself, I don't think I realized at the time that I said those words how profound they were and how much of my actual desire was in those. And that wasn't like those words. It wasn't like my mission statement. It wasn't on a wall or a plaque anywhere. And I honestly, much of my life doing this, the work that I was doing was very much focused on the gospel, very much focused on Jesus. And so I'm not saying that my motives were completely wrong, but what God revealed to me as in that moment of memory was that I was looking to my position as a mirror of my own value and my own significance. And one of the reasons it was so hard to put it down was because putting it down was admitting I failed in my ability to prove my own value and prove my own worth and prove my own significance. And it really, it really sucks. It was a very painful instance. And God showed me that I was trying to build a life, a set of circumstances that didn't require trust in him. And there's this moment just like, I felt so humbled, but also it's like just so much gentleness at the same time from my father. And maybe God knows that I just can't handle a whole lot, but he tends to be very gentle with me. And so I felt like he said to me, he's like, Josh, you've got options here. Like, you have the freedom to continue to try to build this business up, but you have to ask yourself, do you have the strength to, and do you want to? And can you do that before your mortgage is due in 4 days? Or you can choose to, put it down and trust me to see what comes next. And I think I'd sensed that question from him and those options from him for a long time, but I always resisted it. But just in the wake of that memory, those words still like ringing in my ears, like I was just like, oh, it's just, I was able to put it down. And I was like, I know I lost all my desire, and so funny, maybe it's not quite the right word, but like looking back on all those years I spent building my business, and I do consider it ministry, like building that. And I look back, I'm like, I always thought I was driven, but I'm realizing I wasn't actually driven. I think I was actually really desperate, wow. From a young kid, I latched onto this identity of like a future pastor or a future leader. And I experienced people's positive feedback. And I learned really early on, I can feel good if I lean on this like this thing I'm going to achieve in the future. And so it's kind of like this flesh pattern. I sort of like found, oh, this can kind of work for me. And so God's graciousness to me was, allowing me to experience my own the consequence of my own actions, but also not letting me fall too far, too hard. And I mean, it felt like I was falling really hard and really far, and with a lot of pain, but I feel like he was as gentle and used as little pain as possible, which is saying a lot, because I experienced a lot of pain. But it's like, I feel like the identity piece was the issue. Like that was the single biggest thing for me.
I think, you're stirring some big things, and it's helping me to even just name some things. But that, man, that is such an early memory and desire while being a pastor. And it starts when you're like, and my ministry before church ministry was working at a camp, where I was like the goofy guitar player up front and doing silly skits, wearing costumes that were way too small, and kids thinking that was funny. But then you realize, like, you have all that fun, but then you're doing something incredibly significant because you're seeing people come to faith and you're baptizing them. And then you become like, you move from camp ministry to I'm a pastor now. And that kind of root of needing to be significant is heavy. It's, it starts out as like this honor, and I can't believe I get to be part of this moment. And then it becomes this drive, like you said, like, right. I always thought I was driven, but maybe I was desperate, because that drive is what makes you good at being significant initially. And then it becomes this kind of like hit that you need. And I have to stay. I have to stay significant, and losing that when you kind of have that ministry piece pulled from you, or it's falling away, or in my case, it was self-inflicted. That's hard, right? Like, not only do you have the withdrawal, and the question now becomes, and really that it might be the premise of this whole podcast, is how am I going to be significant to anyone or anything anymore? That, like, at a root kind of base level, I think that was my question. And that was the question that kind of prompted this podcast was, is there life after ministry? And that's heavy. That's hard.
Yeah. It is really hard. Absolutely. I mean, I truly believe that, and like, there's a million different thoughts going through my mind right now, but I really do believe that identity is the central issue for us as believers, let alone as pastors or church leaders or ministry leaders. Like, and I think that, I recall this quote I remember reading in the library when I was in Bible college, and it was some pastor magazine. I can't remember, but I remember flipping it open, and there's like a call out quote on one of the pages. And it said, God doesn't need me to burn out in order to achieve his will. And I remember like looking at that, and I was like, oh man, like that feels profound for some reason. I was like 19 or whatever. So like whatever that meant to me. But I realized that, that thoughts that I hold on to that, because I think that there's such a pattern of behavior, that the way that so many churches are set up today, that really encourages pastors just to like give and give and give till the well runs dry, and then give some more, and I think that that's super not healthy. But I think also there's this kind of this martyrdom, that there's like this honor in martyrdom, and which is, it is an honorable thing. But at the same time, there's like, and this is me speaking for myself, like looking back, I didn't recognize this at the time, but I can look back and there's this thread inside of me that was like, look what I'm willing to suffer for my God. Wow. Look what and even that was like this identity piece. And so for me, I think the more that, coming out of ministry and deciding to be done, or deciding to look for what's next, that was agonizing. But on a different level, like it felt different, but to me, it seemed like God was doing physio. Like he'd done some really hard heart work to bring me to a place where I was willing to move from what I was doing to something new. But the physio was really painful as well, but it required, like, God was like resetting my significance compass, I guess, like my whole life I built this system of mirrors where, like, okay, if this person gives me a thumbs up, then okay, great, I'm doing a good job. If this client gives me a thumbs up, I'm doing a good job. Like, and so my am I significant question was answered by the people around me. And so which like idolatry, I mean, I feel like I can say this now because enough time's gone by. But like
Right.
that is kind of idolatry. Like, it's like, okay, I'm looking to you for what only God can really give me. And so the difficult heart physio that I've had to move through is God saying, okay, he's like pointing out these little areas, like, you're looking for significance here, or you're looking for security in this thing. And like, you're not realizing that I'm actually behind that, providing it to you. And so if this thing goes away, then I will open up another channel and you'll be able to experience another channel. And so, like, again, I alluded to before, I feel so blessed and grateful that God, without me realizing it, placed me in this beautifully supportive nest of really strong, excellent relationships, people who could come alongside me and like help me to see things that I was blind to. I couldn't see them through the tears, but they could point out these two things. Yeah.
I have a question for you and so maybe I'm not as spiritual as you, or this is a Canadian term that I don't understand. You said that God brought you through a physio. I don't know what that is. So explain.
Physiotherapy. Like if you have surgery or whatever, and then the doctor, like, you go see a physiotherapist, and it's like, okay, so my friend, he broke his hand. And so, like, okay, he gets surgery to get done. But then in the recovery, go through physio, it's like you're learning, you have to reteach your muscles how to work properly. And so you're being forced to move your shoulder, your knee, or whatever in ways that are very painful, but it's more painful to hold your arm sideways across your body. But that's not how your arm's supposed to move. Like, you got to kind of force yourself through pain in order to actually experience the full range of freedom that God has. And so that's one of the wonderful things that I have been experiencing more and more, is that, as God sort of revealed how much my career was part of my identity, on the other side of that, as I'm learning to look to him more, I'm experiencing more freedom, which is really, really wonderful. I was like, do I say that it was worth it? As a Christian, I should say, yes, it's worth it. It's sometimes I wonder, to be honest, but I also know, like, my view is just so short and God's view is so much bigger and so much longer. And so, does that make sense to unpack that or not?
No, that's good. Yeah, no, we down here in the other part of North America, we call it physical therapy.
Physical therapy. Okay.
Yeah. I just thought, okay, maybe that's like Lectio Divina or something. There's some other thing that God's like, it's shaping your heart, but that's good. And it works. It totally is great.
For a second, I was like, oh, maybe I am more spiritual than you, but no, I just speaking
and all
for
of a sudden
language.
you start feeling really significant again, right? I mean, I think, my 17-year-old, he taught me this, and I'm thinking, like, thank God he's getting it now, because he's a videographer, he edits, and he does really well, and he's so grounded right now and centered, but he just said, like, God, he says, I really want to make sure that I'm putting God in the center of even my business now at 17. He says, because what does it mean? Like, if I build this whole thing up by myself and I don't give God any credit, I'm like, your mother must have taught you this, because I didn't, or maybe he just saw my, like, I don't want to do what Dad did. I want to, so anyway, but there is this, like, I want to be significant in the eyes of the Lord. Like, and that feels like a spiritual, like, that's certainly the right thing to say, but that there is a movement of my heart towards, like, wanting to be centered with my family, with my wife, with my kids. And I want to be significant to them. But that temptation is always there, right? Like, even before we press record, like I was telling you, like our podcast, this little podcast, which is talking about, like, people who've come out of ministry, which feels like this, like, who would listen to this thing? Like, if you're listening right now, why are you listening to this thing? Like, I wouldn't listen to this. Like, this, it feels sad. It feels heavy all the time. I just sit here in the studio and I cry with people. But it's all of us, like there's all of these people listening to this podcast and I have no idea why. And there's something good about this. Like we're just sitting here talking and I don't know how, I can't attribute any of that, but
yeah,
that is something that, man, God, like work on my heart, protect me even in this ministry.
Yeah.
I don't want this to get to a point where I feel like I have to stay significant. I want to stay grounded in how he views me.
Yeah. So. There's a mentor of mine, a guy named Frank Friedman. He talks, this wonderful quote. He says, so often we try to be, adults with God, and people who try really hard to be adults with God end up being very childish to other people. But when you're childish with God, then you end up being like an adult with other people. And I'm like, man, it's just such a great quote. I just love it. I think for me, what the whole significance thing is, like, it's kind of, I think it's about my salvation. And like, I was saved, I don't know, like 6 or 7. It's like, as long as I can remember, I've like really, like, I know I've trusted Jesus, like, but there's also like the work out your salvation aspect of it, where it's the, it's like I'm alive, but I still need food and I still need air and I still need water. And so it's not like I just eat one bite and like, great, I'm done. It's like, no, I need to do that every day. And like, I think that as, all of us as humans, as God's children, we all like, we have these needs baked into us. Just it's how we're designed. We're like, we all desire, we need significance. Like, we need a sense of security. We need to be loved, and there's a lot of other ones, of course, but I think what I'm realizing more and more is that, my day-to-day life is just full of opportunities to look for those things and things that aren't God. But I have to keep coming back to God every day consistently. Like, all right, God, like, man, I did this thing, or I forgot to be ready for this interview with Matt. And so I'm kind of feeling like an idiot right now. Man, like, I need you to remind me of my security and my significance in you. And then he does, right? And sometimes it's like, oh, I should go talk to my wife and like, let her know. And then she gives me a hug and she's like, I love you. And she makes this funny face at me. She always is. And it's like, there's like all these little things, like these ways of that God ends up like providing really simple, practical things. It's like, sometimes I wish he would be more dramatic, because I feel like drama's like, writing in the sky or something. But like, I think that the greater miracles, though, is how consistently he shows up through other people and through the relationships that we have. And the ironic thing about that, and this is where the being an adult with God versus being a child with God is like, when I find my worth and my value, my significance with him, then it's actually a lot easier for me to end up being vulnerable with the people around me about struggles that I'm having. And when you can have a life of consistent vulnerability with people, that actually protects you so much. Because like, I mean, I've experienced this so many times where like, there's like, an angsty bitterness or whatever. And I hold it inside, and that kind of festers. And before you know, I find myself thinking or saying or doing something I never thought I would do. But if I'd actually just been open with that with other people, I would have protected me through that. But the reality is like, I wasn't, because if I'm looking to other people for validation and proof of my significance, and looking to my career for that, then it can't give me, like, ministry is a wonderful thing. Careers are awesome things. But if I'm looking to it for something it was never designed to give me, it's going to let me down. It just is. And so so for me, like, the more that the habits I'm trying to build in my life are ones where it's like, okay, if I'm feeling shame, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, if I'm feeling all these like really unpleasant emotions, heavy emotions, like, okay, it brings me to God, like, remind me again of like what you say I am. And then as he begins to do that, I'm in a much stronger position now to actually go and make wise choices about my next steps. Because my next steps now are like, it's almost like my fear, my shame, like goggles, like kind of like I don't know if they did this in the United States, but in my high school in Canada, like, there's like, I don't know I think it was like age, because I think the drinking age is here is like 19. It's younger than US anyway. But like when you're 18, I think you do this class where like you put on these drunk goggles. It's supposed to show you what it's like when you're drunk, and like you can't see anything or whatever. It's like, and sometimes I think like when you're trying to make wise decisions about our next steps coming out of ministry or coming out of something, and there's so much like emotional pain, difficult things that we have just experienced. Like if I don't actually deal with that stuff with God first, it's like, how can I make a good decision if my brain is screaming at me, my emotions are screaming at me? Like, it's how do you make a good choice when you're constantly being nattered by all the things? But when you bring that to Jesus, and you begin to experience the peace that he has, then decision making gets a lot easier and a lot simpler. So
it's the beer goggles of the soul that get us disoriented, right?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing with that is, I think on the other side of all of that, it's an interesting word, but I've used it more than once. Is I feel like there's a sobriety on the other side, and not that I was drunk, but that there is a sobriety to coming through experiences like that, and seeing the goodness of God and all of that. Now we talked earlier. You talked about you had a friend that your positioning towards your friend was such that you were able to receive from this human being in an area where you had a blind spot. What does that take, and what did he tell you?
Well, I'll never forget getting the text from him. He's like, "Hey, buddy, can we make a plan to get together?" And immediately my radar was like, "Oh crap, what's going on?" Something like this is. And so we made plans, and he basically started the conversation. He's like, "Listen, I have some really hard things to say, and I'm going to screw this up. I know for sure I am. I know I'm going to hurt you, and I don't mean to. I know that like I'm probably not good at this, so I'm really sorry in advance. But I just love you. I just have to say this." And there's something super disarming about that, right? Like just say, I'm going to screw this up, and I'm really but I just love you too much, And so that really helped a lot. I think the other huge thing that is he had poured into my life for years, him and his wife and his family, like just the number of ways that they have blessed me and Sarah and our kids, like I can't even count, and there are some things that they have done for me that will be secret for as long as I live. But it is such a powerful, like he developed such a great foundation of trust. And what he showed me that day was that truly loving somebody means being willing to like step in and be misunderstood, and being willing. And it's like, and so he said things to me, and it was weird. Like it was this kind of a weird disconnect between my brain and my heart. And so it's like right about here, there's like a cutoff. So I wasn't really feeling anything. It's like I wasn't feeling grateful. I wasn't feeling angry. It was just like I was hearing all these things, but just it didn't really sink in. But for 3 days, probably 4 days, I was just wandering around like in a haze. Like I was filled with anger. I was so angry at him for like, again, like there are things that he said that just hurt me deeply. But I mean, like when I look back, it's like, did I have a right to be angry? Did I have like a right to be hurt? It's like, well, I honestly don't know. Like what carried me through that though was as he was speaking, I could sense there's a lot of truth in the things he was saying. And he expressed like a lot of concern for me and my family. And he's like, some things he said, it was that, he could see that I was working very hard. But also that he thought that that there's this blind spot which was preventing me from being able to recognize the dangerous situation I put my family in. And when I look back, I mean, maybe there's like 7 or 8% of the things that he said that maybe it was that I've never done this before. He made mistakes. Maybe, I don't even know. But when I look back, and I've always said I live without regrets, but the regret that I struggle with probably the most these days is like, I really wish I'd taken action a lot sooner. Like he was 100% right. Like that I had led my family into a place where it wasn't healthy. And I couldn't see it because, I'd kind of developed a callus over years of like sustained pressure. I just developed a callus, and it took him stepping in and being willing to hit me hard enough that I felt that I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I mean, the gratefulness I feel to him, I'm so, so thankful that he loved me enough to step in and be willing to say hard things and being willing to endure my anger. And he taught me that that's what real love is. Like, that real love is willing to do that. So it's just, I think if anybody, like, there's not a lot of people that I could have had that conversation with me that I would have been able to hear it well from. And so I'm just so glad God he prepared me for that years in advance by having all these people and putting me in this wonderful place. And so, yeah, it's how to prepare myself to hear. I don't really know if I can answer that in a really concise way other than God prepared me. And I think the other thing is that I knew that what I was experiencing and the feelings I was feeling were just feelings. And one of the really big things that God has taught me over the years is that feelings are really important and emotions are important, but they're not great indicators of reality. And so when I think to the most difficult parts of the transition, it was sorting through my really uncomfortable, hard feelings, and not thrashing in response to that, if that makes sense. And like, okay, God, totally. I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. I feel like I should just go and do this thing. But again, it was like consistently going back and looking to him and say, okay, my feelings are saying this, but I don't know. One of the hardest parts for me, which I suspect will probably resonate with other people coming out of ministry, is that what I've been doing had been my whole life for by that point, 15 years. And so I found myself questioning, after deciding to put it down and think, okay, now what? I found myself questioning everything. I'm like, do I like writing? Like, do I like publishing? Do I like this? I've been doing it for so long. Maybe to realize how desperately I'd been living, but thinking it was drive, and then realize that, wait, I suddenly was second guessing my skills, my ability, whether I had a place in the world beyond what I'd been doing. I was like, great, I'm going to be a meat packing plant or something. And to be clear, I mean, God provided for his wonderful prophet by bringing him food that had been picked out of dung piles. So by ravens. So God doesn't owe me any quality of life necessarily. But it's I was just like, am I just facing a really dark and dismal future? And so, I mean, but I look back and I remember praying, like, God, I don't know what's next, but you have to make it really simple for me because I feel so much confusion. I feel so much like I'm wandering. And so I started applying for jobs, and I got one interview, a single interview. And God made it very clear to me that it was here's how you should prepare for an interview. Here's how you should go about, doing a job hunt and all that stuff. And, but God, just for me, he's like, yeah, a different path. He's like, I don't want you to prepare for the interview. Just show up and, I think he said you can spend 30 minutes looking at past client work that you've done, but nothing more than that. And honestly, even in that, I think God was protecting me because one of the other flesh patterns is over preparation, which is control. I want to control an environment by making sure I'm thinking about every possible scenario and being ready for it. But he's like, he put me on a diet of control for lack of control. And so, yeah, every single step through the interview process, and it ended up being this amazing place to work. And it's an incredible job that just built on all these strengths that I have. And yeah, it was a very affirming, powerful experience, but it looked so differently than I was expecting it to. But it required me, like I said, the identity piece. setting that to the side, the concept of who I was, and realizing that God was using my career crisis as like a window of opportunity. He's like, I'm not going to waste this window of opportunity. I'm going to do some really good heart work in you. I'm not going to waste this, And so I think for a ministry transition, like that is a wide open window of opportunity that God has for your listeners. Like if they're willing to, boy, he can do some incredible work in their hearts and bring so much new freedom but crank open the horizon of possibilities for them. And yeah, it's just.
So it's even just kind of, I realize I know your story, but everybody else doesn't. You did make a move. And in the middle of that move was this conversation with your friend.
Yeah. It's actually the conversation with my friend that led me to the place where I realized I had to. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were, your business before, you were in publishing and you were helping authors in publishing books.
Yeah.
And then you moved. And what are you doing now? Which I think is
today I'm the senior editor at an online publication for like theleadpastor.com. And it is a resource for pastors to help them to streamline their administrative and management workload. It's like resources with software, checklists, downloads, that kind of thing. Resources to help them free up time and headspace to spend more time in discipleship and study and prayer and rest, if you can imagine spending time resting. So it's just like this crazy. I remember like coming across the job posting, like, wait, is this real? Is this like a joke or something like that? And I'm like, well, I'll just apply, like whatever. And like I didn't really put much stock into it. And it was like a couple months before I heard back. I'd completely forgotten about it. But yeah, it's been like
You go to this place. It's called The Lead Pastor, but you're not a lead pastor, and
no,
But I mean, really, in essence, it's like a tech stack, right, for people who are in ministry.
Yeah. So the site, I think probably its bread and butter comes from recommending software, church management software, or financial software, whatever. And then also it's been developing like a community on the side of like newsletter subscribers and folks who just are wanting a place where they can, discuss and talk about and be heard about the struggles, like really unique struggles that comes to church leadership. And I mean, that's been one of the really interesting threads through my career as well, is that, there, apart from a blip of a couple of years, I've been involved in church leadership in a bunch of different capacities for like 25 years now. And it was like, I think back through the experience of putting my business down and then finding a new job. And that happened. Like at the time I was also a lay pastor at my church. And so, that was something like working through that with people from the congregation was like, that was kind of weird. But God provided like in amazing ways through all of that. And so I look at the position he's got me in now. I feel like it's above and beyond what I would have expected, I feel very, very grateful for it and honored that I get to speak at this level to people. And it's a cool thing what God's done for me.
Here's the crazy part about life. I mean, what are you, 50 years old? 45
I just turned 40 this year.
40.
I was like, I got to shave my beard, man. Shoot. There's like a lot more white in my beard now. My kids make fun of me that I have white.
This conversation started about me telling my wife that her belly was too big.
You thought it was 50. That is, I don't know. That is wild, man. That's hilarious.
The fount of wisdom that was coming from you.
Oh, actually, that makes me feel better. It does make me feel better.
There you go. Let me get to what I really wanted to say. And that was, maybe that was some more truth coming from a friend who loves you. But,
oh my goodness.
This is how we work. It just derails very quickly. At this point in your life, I mean, 40 years old, I'm the one who's pushing 50, by the way. There's no guarantee. It's not like you came out of that last thing and you've arrived at this job, never to know another transition again in your life.
Yeah.
Nor is that true of me. Like, I'm here now, but I don't know. I'm not in charge of this thing.
Yeah.
Even though I'm in charge of this thing, I'm not in charge of this thing, right? So how do you take what you've learned and bring that into the next season, whether that's looking at your own like calling, career, significance, identity, and even how you get to steward that in the lives of other people going forward.
Yeah. So I think that, I think God's sort of untangled some myths that I had about how he leads me through all this. Like, looking back, like my wife and I have had so many conversations about what happened. And one of the big things that she said is like, maybe I need to speak up more. And I was like, well, maybe not. Maybe it's okay. But one of the things that I don't know if she'll ever listen to this podcast. Maybe she will. I deserve whatever I get, basically. Is what,
I'm never going to let my wife listen to this one. This is
yeah, like I remember, like she said, like there are so many times where I kind of like had just misgivings about a thing, but I just didn't say anything. I just let it go, and so I think I just kind of had this idea that when God speaks, it's really clear and definitive. And there are times for me when he has spoken, it has been very clear and definitive. But I think a lot of the time, like he speaks in a still small voice, it's very easy for me to miss, and I think often the reason I miss it is because I think it's me. And maybe this ends up straying into heresy. So like just a giant asterisk caveat behind all this, like that I'm still figuring it all out. But one of the things I'm realizing is that I think I have a discernment that's way more active than I give it credit for, but I just don't always recognize it as discernment. It's just like, oh, I just feel weird about this. It's like, and this is where, the community I grew up in as a kid is very, very Dutch and very blue collar, and the ideal, which was, I don't know if it's explicitly stated, if it wasn't explicitly stated, it was almost explicitly stated, was that you grew up and you start a construction business and you work with your hands like that. And so I don't know how many times I've heard my grandfather say working hurts, and there's an element that's true, like Adam was, thank you, Adam. Now we have to work in the hard ground of the thistles and stuff. And so there's an element of that. Yeah. There's like discomfort that comes with that, but that comes with life and with work. But I think that there's like a layer of discomfort that I've learned through this. It's like, oh, there's like this extra twist kind of to the discomfort I feel that I'm not going to ignore anymore. Like I think back to I'm not going to get into specifics, but I think back to some financial things where I was trusting certain people that they were doing things well. And, this comes back to the identity thing again. It's like, I didn't want to be a bad boss. I didn't want to be seen as being controlling or overbearing or micromanaging. And so I trusted, but I never verified. And so looking at it, I was like, I lost thousands and thousands of dollars because I didn't trust that kind of like that gut feelings, like, and so that's one thing that I think that I've learned through all that is like, okay, things don't have to be literally on fire for me to make a move. Like God will give me lots of little warning signs all throughout. And if I pay attention to those and bring them to him, and start bringing them to other people in my life, then that will kind of help to protect me. And so I think something I'm doing a lot more now is it's kind of like I'm just looking less for like the really cool, sexy way that God speaks, and just looking for just like the granular, simple things, and I think the other part of it is like realizing that I also, this great, huge sense of destiny that I lived with, it made me strive for really big things, not realize, like forgetting or not realizing or maybe even ignoring the fact that God's view is not in the span of my career. His view is like generational. And there are blessings that I'm living in today that are a result of my grandfather's choices and my great grandfather's choices. And that, it could be the greatest, like, I don't like thinking about this, but like, it could be that the greatest thing that I do is like training my children well. And even if I never have an impressive job title, I've never get another raise, it's like the best thing was this small thing that I did, and so, yeah, I think that God's been rewiring my definition of success. And like the success is, was I trusting him in a moment? And less around the outcome. And so even like thinking about an ending, a ministry ending or something new beginning is okay. Yeah. Like, and this is like kind of pricking my conscience, as we're saying. It's like, I like to look back on the Josh that drove his business into the ground. Like, what a dude, man. He screwed that up. But then I think about like Paul, God led Paul into things, Galatia, and like to failure, abject failure over and over again, like where Paul says that the disparity even of life. I've heard some commentators speculate that Paul, like things were so bad that like Paul wished that they would be killed, because of how horrible it was. Like, and God led him into that. And so like, so it could be that God led me into the failure that I had. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other like really big questions that kind of spin out of that. But the reality is, just because I'm following God doesn't mean everything's going to turn up roses. Like the second half of Hebrews 11 is like by far my least favorite part of the Bible. It's like, give me some Song of Solomon, but don't give me the second half of Hebrews 11. Like, it's just like there's like the heroes of faith. And then the second half of it is about like those who wandered in caves and were tortured and all, like, and they never saw the promise fulfilled. But then the key verse there is like, of those whom the world was not worthy, and it's like, I really want to live a life that's like the first half of Hebrews 11. But sometimes God leads me to situations that are the second half of Hebrews 11, where it's like, okay, there's a failure here. Or there's like a really painful thing. And so just because something's coming to an end doesn't mean you failed. Depending on what kind of an outlook you have. Because like without faith, it's impossible to please God. And like, that's at the end of the day, I like what I can say with confidence is that I trusted Jesus the best I knew how. Looking back, I'm like, boy, I've learned a lot, and coming back around, if this was to happen again, I know that I would be able to trust him even better because I've learned. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I talked a lot. I don't know if that was an answer, if there were answers in there. Is that?
There were. That was good. I honestly, I used to listen to a lot of music, but now I listen to a lot of podcasts. But there is a song that somebody sent me a few months back, and I listen to it at least a couple of times a week, and probably more. I don't know if you know Ben Rector.
Yes.
And he has a song called "The Richest Man in the World."
Mm.
And I think maybe this is not the main theme, but it's certainly what we've been talking about. And the lyrics, they just go, when I get to heaven, we'll end up outside the pearly gates, but we're all walking, small talking, mingling. I already know what I'm going to say. When we all trade stories of what we did with our lives, I won't say that I played music or could sing. When it's my turn, I think I'll smile and say I was the richest man in the world. Father to a baby girl and 2 boys that I know love me. Was famous to a few good friends, and beside me till the end was my wife, who is so lovely. And I don't know who could ask for any more, the richest man in the world.
Yeah.
It's not the Bible, but that's pretty good.
Verses are flying through my mind. Like, I think Paul talks about like live simply, like, and like don't have like an empire building mindset, and like, and like, and honestly, that's one of the things I think for me that I don't think I realized what I was doing as a kid when I accepted the offer that the enemy was giving me. It was like, hey, if you take this identity on, as like this will give you significance today. I don't think I realized what accepting that was going to do, because like I now constantly struggle with the empire building mentality. Like, ooh, I want to build this big thing and that big thing. And I think there's part of that's just like, there's an entrepreneurialism that I kind of have. And I'm visionary. I like to think about cool, fun things. And I think that's totally fine. But at the end of the day, like what I have to continually remind myself is that like God has already given me everything I need for life and godliness. Like, as in 1 Peter, like he's given me everything I need. And And I'm like, oh, if I just get this raise, or just get this promotion to this next position, or like, oh, if I get hired somewhere else here, like, or like my church gets bigger, or like there's so much allure to that for me. But it's like I have to keep coming. It's like, but at the end of the day, like I go to bed with my wife and I wake up with my kids, usually too early because my kids are my kids, and like I find myself being like, man, if I'm living from workday to workday rather than for like with my family and with my community that God's placed me in, I mean, like I'm missing the best parts of it all, and it took really painful stuff for me to be able to see that and be able to recognize that. And so, I make no promises to my future self, but I will say, I really think I'd like to think at least that the more I talk about this, the more I'm downgrading my own capacity here. But, I think that I'm learning that there's just a joy in sitting down on our couch, which is way rattier than I wish it was. And, just watching a show with the kids, or just like, I'm almost constantly a little bit annoyed with our dog, but even then it's like, but she's a good dog, and like there's so many things in my life. Like, I wish I could fix this and make it better. It's like, but I can just be okay with myself right now. And yeah. And I think that the time of like leaving my business behind to take steps into what God had next for me, there was so much more at stake than just my career. It's like God had great things for me through all that. And I can see like he's so faithful, and he helped me to not only find something that was fulfilling, like on a heart level, but also he's like, I feel like I've got more range of motion just in my life. Like I'm less worried about what people are thinking about me. I'm less worried about my impact, and I'm still worried about those things, to be clear, but less so. Anyway.
It's because of all the good physio you've done.
All the good physio. Absolutely.
Well, Joshua.
Man, I can't believe you thought I was 50. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. We're going to have to. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Hey, this is good. It felt like this is just two guys just talking. And so if you're still here listening, thanks for listening. But this piece of the backdrop of the Bible is always Jesus calling his people to kingdom against the backdrop of empire. And there is a lot of significance built up in the empire. And I know that the earlier version of you would have loved to be significant in any room that you walked in. And I'm just thankful that you came into this room here on a podcast with us, because this was significant. And your story is molding. It was helpful for me, and it stirs. And so I just appreciate you wrestling through it, what God has done in you and through you and because of you and in your life and your family's life, and just encourage you to keep going. And for those of you who are listening, keep going. Don't give up. Whatever that place is that you're at, Lord has you.
I think the greatest thing I can say now is that God's been teaching me that I can walk into any room and talk to any person because I'm carrying Jesus with me. And so I belong anywhere that he leads me. And that's been really beautiful to start to experience as well. That's really hard to learn, but it's been really beautiful. And so I hope and I pray that freedom for everybody that ministry transitions, touches, and is impacted with. So
amen. Thanks for coming on the podcast here today. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
I'll be honest, I loved that conversation with Joshua. If your head is spinning and maybe your heart feels tender right now, then you're not alone. Joshua reminded us that identity work isn't a one-time decision, it's daily bread. There's a reason Hebrews speaks of faith that keeps walking even when the outcomes aren't what we planned, and why Jesus keeps inviting us to be known by our love and not by our titles. Maybe as you listened, you heard your own story in Josh's words. The early affirmation, the pressure to stay significant, and the slow callus that forms under constant strain. And then the gentle way that God loosens our grip. So here's what I'm taking with me. First, intention isn't enough. In transition, people don't experience our hearts. They experience our actions. Love requires courage, clear steps, and sometimes a friend who will risk being misunderstood to tell us the truth. Second, control masquerades as wisdom. Over-preparation can be a way to avoid trusting God. And so the invitation is to surrender just enough to hear his still small voice in the ordinary, everyday decisions. And third, the kingdom vision of enough is different. Success looks like faithfulness to Jesus and the people entrusted to you, not applause in every room. So if you're facing a change or a termination or a succession conversation, then you don't have to improvise your way through it. You can visit ministrytransitions.com. You can also go there and donate to support a leader who is in that place of transition. Or maybe it's you and you need to book a confidential call to walk through what's coming. We will help walk through so you can protect the people that matter, preserve the purpose of that organization that you lead or you're a part of, and then plan what's next, what's coming up. And if today resonated, then check out the show notes for links to resources we mentioned and to connect with Josh's work at The Lead Pastor. And my ask, would you just share this episode with somebody, whether it's a board member, an executive pastor, a friend who needs language for what they're feeling that would help them to keep going? And wherever you're at, just remember the Lord has you, and there's good work ahead that does not depend on your title. Thanks for listening to the Life After Ministry podcast. I'm Matt Davis, and we'll see you next time.